Now our first question addressed to our Trinitarian panel from our non-Trinitarian panel. How many Lord, Yud-He, Vav-He's, is the Trinitarian position proposing? Not just how many gods, but how many Yud-He, Vav-He's is the Trinitarian position proposing? 2 minutes.
There's one Yahweh. Scripture's quite clear about that. Yahweh is complex in his unity, which is why in Genesis chapter 18, Yahweh, quite explicitly in Hebrew, is dialoguing with Abraham and Sarah here on the earth. One Yahweh, the same Yahweh who sits enthroned in heaven. So the Scripture's unambiguous about that there's one God only, one Yahweh only, and also there is one Father, one Son, one Spirit, who is all part of this one God, the way he's made himself known. So there's no ambiguity, no mystery, no difficulty. One Yahweh, complex in his unity, the overall testimony of Scripture.
It is very important to recognize that the Greek term kurios is used of Jesus as his primary designation in the New Testament, and that is the very term that is used to render the divine name, the Tetragrammaton, in the Old Testament, Yahweh, which is the specific identification of God. So in these texts in the New Testament that identify Jesus as Yahweh, we have inspired commentary that tells us exactly who Jesus is. We have Old Testament texts that tell us that Yahweh places the sins of his people upon the Messiah, and so clearly the Father is identified as Yahweh, and yet Hebrews chapter 1, verses 10 through 12, John chapter 12, there are numerous places where Jesus is identified as Yahweh, and of course the Spirit is the Spirit of Yahweh. So we have one name, and we have to allow all of the New Testament texts to speak. We can't start with the presupposition of Unitarianism and say, well, I'm going to enforce this upon the text. We have to allow the text to instruct us, and we have to allow for what took place between the Testaments in the incarnation of Jesus Christ, this great event, which then forms the very matrix of the New Testament revelation itself.